My parents fired me after 15 years. My younger brother Dylan smirked and said, "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting." I quietly packed up my office, leaving their desperate calls for help to begin. I'm Matthew Hayes. I'm 38, and after dedicating 15 years to building my family's company, my own parents fired me for being too expensive. Before I get into how their panicked calls led to the most unbelievable corporate takeover you've ever heard of, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It all started on a Tuesday. The air in the conference room was thick, with tension, the kind that makes the back of your neck prickle. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the long mahogany table with a blank face of corporate neutrality, which I knew was a bad sign. My mother, Sarah, sat to his right, her focus locked on an insignificant scratch on the table. Across from me, my younger brother Dylan wore a triumphant and cruel smirk he wasn't even trying to hide. For 15 years, Hayes Properties was my whole world. I'd personally built its entire digital infrastructure, from the tenant application, portals across 50 complexes to the intricate maintenance request system and the secure payment network handling millions a month. It all came from my mind. I built it to be the silent, reliable backbone of our family's success. My father cleared his throat. "Matthew," he started, his voice formal and cold. "We've been reviewing the company's finances with a consulting firm." He slid a glossy binder across the table. It was titled Operational Efficiency Analysis. I didn't need to open it. For weeks, these cost slashers, as I'd nicknamed them, had been roaming the halls. "Your salary is a significant line item, Matthew, a very significant one," my mother added, still focused on the scratch on the table. Then Dylan leaned forward, his smirk turning into a full-blown grin. "We can get 3 junior engineers for what we pay you, Matt," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Nothing personal. It's just smart business." Those words sucked all the air out of the room. 15 years of 2 a.m. server reboots, canceled dates, and holidays spent troubleshooting a system only I understood. I'd built them an empire on a rock-solid digital foundation, and they were dismissing me like a piece of faulty hardware they could swap out. I didn't argue or yell. I just looked at my father, then my mother. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of guilt in my mother's eyes before she stamped it out. My father's face remained a blank wall. They had already made their decision. I stood up, pushed in my chair, and nodded once. "I understand," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. As I walked back to my office, I passed the main server room. Through the glass, I could see the familiar blinking green lights of the system I'd created. A small line of text was visible in the back-end diagnostic log. Data archiving protocol scheduled to run in 60 days. It was a routine I'd built, a routine that needed my oversight, a ticking time bomb they didn't even know existed. Packing up 15 years of my life was a strange process. It didn't take as long as you'd think. A few framed photos, a coffee mug, and a stack of technical manuals I'd memorized. The whole time, a reel of memories played in my head, not the good ones, but the small cuts, the 1,000 tiny moments of being taken for granted that I had systematically ignored for years. I wasn't just their son. I was effectively their first employee. I remembered the true beginning, working out of the damp basement of their first office building while they were out hustling. I taught myself to code because we couldn't afford to hire anyone. I pieced together our first server from salvaged parts. The system grew organically as the company exploded from 1 property to 50 across 3 states. With every acquisition, the system I built became more complex, more essential. It was the company's central nervous system, handling rent payments and dispatching maintenance crews with ruthless efficiency. It was our single biggest competitive advantage, and I was the architect. The problem was, I was also the only one who truly understood it. This wasn't by choice, it was by budget. For at least 5 years, I had been begging them to invest in a proper tech department. "Dad, we need to hire at least 2 support techs," I'd say, pointing to a graph showing our server load approaching critical levels. "And we have to start documenting the system. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you guys are flying blind." My father would lean back in his expensive leather chair, a chair I knew my system had paid for several times over. "Son, the money is tight right now. Every spare dollar has to go into acquiring that new property portfolio in Pittsburgh. Besides," he'd add with a hearty pat on my shoulder, "you handle it all so well on your own. Why pay for more people when we have the best right here?" My mother's approach was a softer form of invalidation. "Oh, Matthew, you always worry so much," she'd say, waving her hand as if shooing away a fly. "It's all just computers and wires. As long as the rent checks keep coming in, it's working. Don't overcomplicate things." I remembered one Thanksgiving vividly. I was supposed to be at my then-girlfriend's family dinner. At 2 p.m., my phone blew up. A power surge at one of our main data hubs had corrupted a critical database. I spent the next 6 hours on the phone, painstakingly, rebuilding the index from a backup. I saved the company from a week-long outage. When I finally called my father late that night, he just said, "Good job, son. Knew you could handle it," and then told me all about the delicious turkey Dylan had carved. My girlfriend broke up with me a week later. The only person who seemed to get it was Frank, our head of maintenance. One afternoon, after another frustrating budget meeting, he found me in the server room. "Don't let them get to you, Matt," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This whole place, this entire 50-complex operation, it runs on what's inside your head. They haven't got a clue. They think it's the buildings that make the money. It's not. It's this." He tapped the glass of a server rack with a thick finger. "It's you." His words were a small comfort, but the frustration kept growing, especially after Dylan officially came on board as vice president of operations. He got a corner office, a fat expense account, and a complete lack of understanding of how the business actually ran. "So you just make the computers work?" he once said, looking at my whiteboard covered in complex diagrams. "Seems pretty straightforward." He saw me as a necessary but overpriced utility, a problem to be solved, not an asset to be valued. Then came the consultants, introduced by Mr. Henderson, an old family friend who played golf with my dad. They were 2 slick guys in suits who spoke entirely in buzzwords: synergy, optimization, right sizing. They produced colorful charts and glossy slides that all said the same thing: cut costs. The biggest, easiest cost to cut, they pointed out, was the highly paid head of engineering, who could be easily replaced by a team of cheaper, younger, and more agile talent. "You're paying for legacy knowledge," one of them said smoothly. "In today's fast-moving tech landscape, you want nimble, hungry juniors. You can get 3 of them for this one salary. Think of the immediate ROI." My parents, already feeling the intense financial pressure from a bad real estate investment they'd made on the side, saw the consultant's proposal as a magic bullet. Firing me was easier than admitting they'd gambled and lost millions. Looking back, all the signs were there. The way Mr. Henderson would ask me overly specific questions about our system, the way my parents would awkwardly change the subject whenever I brought up long-term strategic planning. They were desperate, and Dylan was just happy to finally be the undisputed prince. I sealed my cardboard box with a loud strip of packing tape. As I carried it out of my office for the last time, I passed Frank in the hallway. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a sad, weary understanding. He shook his head slowly. "They just made the biggest mistake of their lives, son," he whispered. At the time, I had no idea how prophetic his words would turn out to be. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, leaving the blinking green lights and my entire family behind. I felt a profound sense of loss, but underneath it, something else was stirring. A cold, hard resolve. They had made their business decision. Now it was time for me to make mine. That night, after dropping the box of my former life in the corner of my silent apartment, I opened my laptop. An unread email sat in my inbox. The subject line was simple. Interview invitation, Chief Systems Architect. The sender was Ridge, View Management, our biggest, smartest, and most successful competitor. The first 2 months after I left Hayes Properties were a strange gift of silence. For the first time in 15 years, my phone wasn't a time bomb of emergency calls. I could eat a meal without mentally troubleshooting a database error. I slept through the night. I went through 3 rounds of interviews with Ridgeview. Their CEO, a sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, didn't just ask me about my skills. She grilled me on my philosophy of system design and building resilient platforms. It was a conversation I had longed to have with my own father for years. Then, exactly 59 days after I was fired, Frank called me on my personal cell. "Matt, it's Frank," he said, his voice tight with a tension I knew all too well. "We've got a problem, a big one." "What's going on, Frank?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "The system's acting up badly. Maintenance requests are vanishing into thin air. It's not just a glitch. It's like they were never even filed. Dylan's new hotshot tech kid, Chad, keeps telling everyone it's a minor caching issue." "It's Mrs. Gable in 12B, Matt," Frank continued, his voice dropping. "She's 80 years old, lives alone. Her ceiling is about to collapse from a pipe leak. She's been calling for 3 days. Chad just keeps telling her to submit a ticket online, but the portal is broken. She's been calling my personal cell crying. I don't know what to do." The image of this poor, elderly woman terrified in her own home made my blood run cold. This wasn't about servers and code anymore. This was about people. "It's not a caching issue, is it, Frank?" I said quietly. There was a long pause. "No, son, it's not. It feels different. It feels like the whole thing is starting to rot from the inside out." I knew exactly what it was. Tomorrow was day 60. The data archiving protocol, a powerful script I had written to run quarterly, was designed to move old, inactive records to deep storage. It required manual supervision to distinguish between genuinely old data and recently active data that just hadn't been updated in a few weeks. It was a fail-safe, a human check, to prevent exactly what was about to happen. Without my oversight, the script would run blind. It would be a systematic, cascading data catastrophe. I explained this to Frank in the simplest terms I could. He swore under his breath. "I'll try to tell them," he said, but we both knew it was useless. Dylan wouldn't listen to an old maintenance guy over his new tech genius. The next day, the storm broke. My phone started ringing at 9 a.m. The first call was from Dylan. "Hey, Matt, that maintenance thing is a little worse than we thought. Chad's having some trouble tracking it down. What's the admin password for the root database?" It was a fundamentally reckless question, like asking for the launch codes to a nuclear silo. "I'm no longer an employee, Dylan," I said, calmly. "I can't give you that information. It would be a massive security breach. Don't be like that. We're family. Just help us out." "You define the terms of our relationship, Dylan. It's business. And I'm no longer in business with you," I said, and hung up. An hour later, my mother called, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "Matthew, honey, your brother is really struggling. He's so stressed. Can't you just come in for a little while?" "Mom, I don't work there anymore. It wouldn't be appropriate." "Don't be so difficult, Matthew. This is your family's legacy on the line." "You were the one who said it was just business, Mom." "A smart business decision," I replied, the words colder than I intended. I ended the call. By mid-afternoon, the real panic had set in. My father called, his voice booming with rage and fear. "Matthew, the payment. Processing system is completely down. It's rejecting all incoming rent payments. It's the first of the month. Do you know what kind of penalties we face from the banks?" "I have an idea," I said. The archiving protocol was likely treating active tenant payment profiles as inactive. "You have to fix this." he yelled, his voice cracking. "This is a disaster of your making." "My making?" I asked, a dangerous calm settling over me. I seem to recall presenting a budget for a support team and a documentation project for 5 years running. Who was it that called that unnecessary overhead? "I'll pay you $200 an hour, whatever you want. Just come down here." This was the moment. My mind flashed back to the cold conference room, Dylan's smirk, my mother's averted eyes, and my father's cold dismissal. The years of being undervalued, of my warnings being systematically ignored, a lifetime of it. Then my phone buzzed with a new email notification. I glanced at it. The sender was Eleanor Vance. The subject, formal offer, Chief Systems Architect, Ridgeview Management. The salary was 30% higher than what my father had been paying me, plus a substantial signing bonus and stock options. It was more than the money. It was the title, the respect, the opportunity to build something brilliant without having to beg for the tools to do it. The memory of my crying little brother vanished, replaced by the crystal-clear image of Dylan's smug face in that boardroom. My resolve hardened. "Dad," I said into the phone, my voice steady and clear, "you made a business decision. I've made one too." Before he could respond, I hung up. I opened the email from Ridgeview and typed a single-word reply. Accepted. Then I turned my phone off. For the first time in my adult life, the silence felt like peace. Starting at Ridgeview was like stepping out of a black-and-white movie into glorious Technicolor. The offices were sleek and modern, designed for collaboration. On my first day, Eleanor Vance personally walked me to my new corner office. "This is your space, Matthew," she said. "Your team is comprised of 4 top-tier senior engineers. Your budget for the first year is in the welcome packet. We hired you because you're one of the best. We trust you to build us the most robust, scalable, and secure platform in the industry. My door is always open. Don't hesitate to ask for what you need." What I need. The words were so simple, yet they felt revolutionary. For 15 years, my professional life had been defined by what I couldn't have. Here I was, being asked what I needed to succeed. It was disorienting in the best possible way. Meanwhile, the storm at Hayes Properties was escalating into a Category 5 hurricane. Frank kept me updated through occasional, discreet text messages. "They tried to restore from a server backup," one read. "It was a week old. They wiped out the last 7 days of maintenance logs and payment records. Chad is blaming a corrupted server glitch. Dylan hired 2 more junior guys from some online freelance site," another said a week later. "It's like watching 3 kids try to solve a Rubik's Cube by hitting it with a hammer over a bad video call." The chaos wasn't just internal anymore. Tenants were furious. Occupancy rates, once my family's proudest metric, were plummeting. About a month into my new role, Eleanor called me into her office. "Matthew," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "I have a task for you, something that requires your unique and intimate perspective." She pushed a file across her desk. "I want a full competitive analysis of the major players in our region. I'm particularly interested in your professional, unbiased evaluation of Hayes Properties. I know the history, but I want your expert assessment of their current operational vulnerabilities from a purely technical standpoint." My heart skipped a beat. This was a corporate chess move. I spent the next week on it. I didn't write a single word about family betrayal or hurt feelings. I wrote a cold, hard technical analysis of a company in a death spiral. I detailed the custom, undocumented, and fragile nature of their IT system. I identified the single point of failure, the complete reliance on one person's institutional knowledge. I outlined the cascading consequences of the data archiving protocol, explaining how it would lead to catastrophic data loss, massive legal failures, and a complete breakdown of tenant trust. My conclusion was stark. Without a top-to-bottom system, rebuilt by an expert team, the company's core operational integrity was compromised beyond any hope of repair. I didn't have to guess. I had built the house, and I knew exactly where all the load-bearing walls were. I submitted the 20-page report to Eleanor. She read it in complete silence. When she finished, she placed it on her desk and looked up at me. "This is devastatingly thorough," she said. "Thank you, Matthew. This is exactly what I needed." A few days later, I got a final text from Frank. It was a picture of a letter from Vanguard Holdings, our former largest client. The text, underneath, was short and to the point. "It's official. Vanguard just terminated their contract. That's 20 of our most profitable complexes gone. This is a death blow, Matt. The company is in a nosedive, and there are no parachutes." I looked at the picture, then out the window of my new office. I didn't feel joy or sadness. I felt a profound sense of inevitability, like watching a law of physics play out. Actions have consequences. This wasn't personal anymore. It was just business. And my old family business was failing just as I had predicted it would. The call from Frank was the final tremor before the earthquake. I knew what the loss of their biggest client meant. It was a public vote of no confidence that would echo through the entire regional real estate market. Hayes Properties was no longer just struggling. It was visibly sinking, and the sharks were beginning to circle. That evening, as I was pulling into my driveway, my headlights landed on a familiar figure slumped on my front steps. It was Dylan. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His expensive suit was rumpled, and the signature smirk was gone, replaced by a raw, hollow-eyed desperation. I killed the engine and got out of my car, my keys jingling in the sudden silence. I walked slowly toward him. "Matt," he said, his voice hoarse and broken. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Dylan," I replied, my voice flat. "Please," he begged, the words sounding foreign coming from his lips. "Just hear me out. Vanguard is gone. The bank is calling our loans. We're going to lose everything. The company is going to go under." "I see." "No, you don't see," he shot back, a flash of his old arrogance returning before being immediately extinguished by a wave of despair. "It's a complete disaster. The system, it's a black box. Chad and his guys quit this morning. They took their final paychecks and just walked out. They said the whole system was unethically complex and unsalvageable. They said only a ghost could have built it. I'm not a ghost, Dylan. I'm the guy you told to pack his things because I was too expensive." The words hung in the cool night air between us. He flinched as if I'd physically struck him. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine shame in my brother's eyes. "I know, okay? I know I was an idiot. I was jealous of you, always. I hated that Dad relied on you for the important stuff. I was a stupid, arrogant fool. Dad and Mom, we were all stupid. But this is our family's legacy, Matt. Dad built this company from nothing." "No, Dylan," I corrected him, my voice dangerously quiet. "Dad signed the papers. I built the engine that made it run for 15 years, and you all decided to throw the mechanic out and let the chauffeur try to fix it. How did that work out for you?" He had no answer. He just stared at me, his face pale and haggard. "The insurance provider is threatening to drop us because our maintenance records are gone," he whispered. "The bank is threatening to freeze our assets. It's not just one thing, Matt. It's everything. It's all falling apart at once." He took a step closer. "Just help us," he pleaded. "I am begging you. Name your price. Any price. $1 million. A stake in the company. Whatever you want. Just come back and fix it. Please. You're the only one in the world who can." I looked at my brother, the golden child, now brought so low that he was standing on my doorstep begging for a lifeline. A small, tired 10-year-old part of me felt a flicker of pity, but it was buried under 15 years of being treated like a utility. It was buried under the memory of that triumphant smirk. I took a deep breath. "You said you could run the company without me, Dylan. You said it was just business. Well, this is the result of your business decision. Now you have to live with it." I finally walked to my front door and unlocked it. I stepped inside and closed the solid oak door. The click of the latch echoed the finality of my words. The next morning, I was in a strategy meeting at Ridgeview when my phone vibrated. It was a text from Frank. I picked it up. It was a photo of a crisp white envelope lying on the reception desk at Hayes Properties. The return address was from a prestigious law firm that handled major corporate transactions, but it was the name discreetly printed under the law firm's logo that made the air leave my lungs. Ridgeview Management. My own company. I mumbled an apology and excused myself from the meeting, my mind racing. I walked to the end of the hall and called Frank. "What is that, Frank?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A courier just dropped it off," he said, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's addressed to your father, your mother, and Dylan. I saw the letterhead, Matt. What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," I said, and it was the honest truth. I had no idea this was coming. I hung up and walked almost in a trance directly to Eleanor Vance's office. "You've heard, I take it?" she said calmly, steepling her fingers on her desk. "Heard what, Eleanor? What's going on?" "That letter," she smiled, a small, satisfied smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your competitive analysis was very persuasive, Matthew. It pointed out a unique and time-sensitive opportunity, a company with a valuable portfolio of properties crippled by a catastrophic but eminently fixable operational failure. In the world of mergers and acquisitions, that's what we call a perfect target." She leaned forward. "The board approved the move last night. We made a formal, non-negotiable offer this morning, a low one, I might add, given their current state of extreme distress. They'll have no choice but to accept. It's either this or Chapter 7 bankruptcy." It took me a moment to process the sheer, stunning scale of what she was saying. Ridgeview was buying Hayes Properties. My new employer was buying my old one. "And there's one more thing," she continued, picking up a document from her desk. "A key non-negotiable condition of this acquisition." She turned the document around and pointed to a specific clause. Section 4, subsection B. My eyes found my own name. "As a binding condition of this acquisition, Mr. Matthew Hayes, Chief Systems Architect of Ridgeview Management, will be appointed to lead the full technical audit and subsequent system integration of all Hayes Properties assets." I stared at the words, then back at Eleanor. The world tilted on its axis and then snapped back into sharp, brilliant focus. I wasn't just the guy who refused to help. I wasn't just the guy who had been vindicated. I was the guy who was now in charge. The desperate calls from my family had ended for good, because from now on, if they wanted to talk to me, they would have to schedule an appointment. The news of the acquisition detonated within the hollowed-out shell of Hayes Properties. Frank told me later that when my father opened the letter, his face turned a shade of gray Frank had never seen before. My mother simply sat down and stared into the middle distance, and Dylan just stood there, speechless, the reality of the situation finally crashing down on him. Their family legacy was being sold for pennies on the dollar to their biggest rival, and I was the face and the engine of that takeover. A week later, I walked back through the glass doors of the Hayes Properties building for the first time since I'd been so coldly dismissed. But I wasn't walking in as a shamed son. I was walking in as a senior executive from the new parent company. I saw them waiting for me in the doorway of my father's old office. My parents and Dylan. They looked smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of their failure. "Matthew," my father started, his voice strained. "Mr. Hayes," I corrected. Him, my voice polite but firm, creating an immediate and unbridgeable distance. "Perhaps we should all convene in the conference room to discuss the transition plan." The cold, professional title hit them harder than any angry words could have. It drew a line in the sand as clear as a razor cut. In this building, on this day, I was not their son or their brother. I was their new reality. We sat in the same conference room where they had unceremoniously fired me. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. This time, I sat at the head of the table. I laid out the transition plan with calm, professional precision. I talked about asset evaluation, operational audits, and personnel reviews. I didn't gloat, I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't even make eye contact for longer than was professionally necessary. My cool, detached professionalism was my armor and my weapon. It was a language they understood, the language of business, and it was now being used to inform them, in no uncertain terms, that they had lost complete and total control. "The first order of business," I said, looking at a point on the wall just over Dylan's head, "is a complete top-to-bottom overhaul of the IT infrastructure. My team will begin a full diagnostic tomorrow morning. Dylan, you'll need to provide them with all existing administrative credentials and any and all documentation." "There is no documentation," Dylan mumbled. "I'm aware," I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone. "Then you'll just provide the credentials. My team will create the documentation. We do things correctly at Ridgeview." After the meeting, as I was packing my leather briefcase, my mother approached me. "Matthew, can we please just talk for 5 minutes? As a family?" A part of me felt a twinge of the old guilt, but I knew that giving in would erase the boundary I had worked so hard to establish. "Mom," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "Right now, my absolute priority is to stabilize this company, to protect Ridgeview's investment. Any conversations about non-business matters are best saved for another time and another place." I then turned to her, my voice becoming formal again. "We can schedule a follow-up through my assistant if you have any further operational questions." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. The boundary was set. It was absolute. She understood. The weeks that followed were a surreal exercise in reverse engineering my own life's work. My team at Ridgeview marveled at the complexity and ingenuity of what I'd built single-handedly, and they shook their heads in disbelief at the complete lack of support or documentation. "It's like one guy built an entire skyscraper," one of them said, "and then they fired him and were surprised when the elevator stopped working." One of the most surreal moments came when I mandated that all remaining Hayes employees, including my brother, attend a multi-day training session on the new Ridgeview IT protocols and ethics policies. I assigned it to a sharp, capable junior engineer on my team, a woman named Priya, who was half Dylan's age and twice as competent. I walked past the training room and glanced through the glass partition. I saw Dylan sitting at a computer terminal, his shoulders slumped, as Priya patiently explained the basics of the new help desk ticketing system. He looked up, and our eyes met for a brief second through the glass. I saw shame, I saw resentment, and for the very first time in my life, I saw a flicker of something that looked like genuine, unadulterated respect. I just gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod and kept walking. The message was clear. This is how a professional organization operates. This is what you threw away. 6 months passed. The integration of Hayes properties into the Ridgeview portfolio was a case study in success. Under my leadership, we didn't just repair the old, broken system. We tore it down and rebuilt it from scratch. Tenant satisfaction, which had hit rock bottom, soared. My own reputation within the company was solidified. I wasn't just the guy who had survived a nasty family betrayal. I was the guy who could turn a sinking ship into a flagship. My relationship with my family, however, remained in a state of professional icy distance. I saw them in quarterly review meetings and exchanged polite work-related emails. The personal connection felt severed, perhaps permanently. Then, out of the blue, my father called my personal cell and asked me to have dinner with him. Just the two of us. I was hesitant. But something in his voice, a profound weariness I'd never heard before, made me agree. We met at a quiet, old-school steakhouse. For a long while, we ate in a heavy, awkward silence. Finally, he put down his fork and knife and looked at me, his eyes tired and shadowed. "I was wrong, Matthew," he said, the words coming out slow and heavy. "Your mother and I, we were wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "It wasn't just the money," he continued, his gaze dropping to the white tablecloth. "It was pride. My pride. We made a bad investment. A speculative land deal down in Florida. It went south. We were in deep, deeper than we ever let on to anyone, especially you. We were facing the possibility of bankruptcy." He took a shaky breath. "Henderson, our friend, your godfather." He was in my ear constantly. He kept telling me how bloated our operational costs were, how we were living in the past. He introduced us to those consultants. He pushed it, Matt. He said it was the only smart move, the only way to free up capital and save ourselves. He made it sound so simple, so logical, a lifeline. He looked up, and for the first time I saw not just a failed businessman, but a broken man. We were scared, and we were ashamed. It was easier to believe a stranger in a suit who told us what we wanted to hear than to admit to our own son that we had failed, that we had put the family's legacy at risk. He played on my biggest fear, that I'd have nothing to leave for Dylan. We sacrificed you to save our own pride. This was the missing piece of the puzzle. It didn't excuse what they did, but it reframed it. They weren't just cruel. They were desperate, weak, and had been masterfully manipulated. "Henderson?" I asked quietly. "Why would he do that to you? He was your best friend." My father gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "Best friend?" We found out a month after. The Ridgeview acquisition was announced. His lawyer accidentally sent an email to our old accountant. Henderson had a shell company set up, ready to make a lowball offer. He was planning to buy us out for 10 cents on the dollar the moment the bank called our loans. He wasn't trying to help us save the company. He was trying to push it off a cliff so he could pick through the wreckage. He shook his head slowly. "We were so busy betraying you. We never saw the real snake in the grass." We sat in silence for another long minute. He had confessed. He had laid the family's shame bare on the table between us. It wasn't an apology that asked for forgiveness. It was a statement of fact, a final, painful accounting of the truth. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. It was all I could offer. It wasn't forgiveness or absolution, but it was an acknowledgement. It was a fragile, tentative start. The next day, as I was wrapping up at the office, I received an email. It was from Dylan's personal account. There was no subject line. I clicked it open, half expecting another desperate plea or a bitter accusation. The body of the email contained only 3 words. "You were right." It wasn't an apology. It was a concession, a surrender, a complete and total recognition of a truth he had spent his entire life denying. I stared at the 3 words on the screen for a long moment. Then with a quiet click, I deleted the email. I didn't need his concession anymore. My vindication didn't come from his words or my father's confession. It came from the work. It always had. Today, I'm sitting in my old office. It's been renovated, of course. The walls are a cool, calming gray, the furniture is modern, and the old wheezing server that used to hum in the closet has been replaced by a silent, powerful blade server connected to the Ridgeview cloud. This is my office, but it's also not. It's a symbol of how much has changed, both for the company and for me. From my window, I can see the city stretching out, a vibrant landscape of possibilities. I'm no longer the guy in the back room just keeping the lights on. I'm an architect of the future for a company that values foresight over short-term savings, that invests in resilience instead of cutting corners. My family, our relationship, is rebuilding. It's a slow, careful process, like trying to glue together a shattered vase. It will never be what it was, and maybe that's okay. It will be something new, something more honest. There are awkward holiday dinners filled with long silences and unspoken truths. My father is quieter now, more thoughtful. My mother tries too hard to be kind, her gestures full of a regret she can't quite put into words. Dylan is in a junior, project management role at another company in another state. I hear he's doing okay. He's learning from the ground up, the way I did. Maybe one day we'll be brothers again, maybe not. I don't feel triumph when I think about what happened. The anger, the bitterness, they've mostly faded, replaced by something quieter. What I feel is a profound and unshakable clarity. My family made a terrible mistake. They thought my value was a number that could be reduced on a spreadsheet. They thought they could swap out 15 years of dedication and institutional knowledge for something cheaper and easier. They fired their son, but they couldn't fire the consequences. They learned the hard way that the most expensive thing a company can lose isn't money. It's irreplaceable knowledge. It's trust. In the end, this was never really a story about revenge. It was a story about respect. Respect for the work, respect for experience, and ultimately, respect for yourself. Especially when the people who are supposed to love you the most forget to. You have to be the one to know your own worth, to build your own value, and to stand by it, even if you have to stand alone. You have to be willing to build your own future brick by brick, line of code by line of code, because a foundation built on true, undeniable value is the only one that can't ever be shaken. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where your experience was undervalued in work or in life? I'd be interested to hear about it. Please share your story in the comments below.